Dilapidated Mall, property in Wadawaj, would formally commence in the coming days. The government acquired the property in 2008 with the intentions of converting it into government offices under the management of Amazon Properties Limited, a wholly owned government of St. Lucia company. Almost 9 years to the date, the unfinished, dilapidated structure in the flood zone remains untouched, unless one counts the graffiti adorning its walls. But 2 weeks ago, NBC Prime received word that the building, which has been a seller's headache for almost a decade, has been sold. We sought confirmation from former Prime Minister and Minister for Infrastructure Stephenson King.
The arrangements are being made through the Ministry of Economic Development and the Prime Minister. I do not have the full details. What I do know is an investor out of Trinidad will be engaged with the government in an arrangement that will allow the government to be able to utilize the building while the investor will develop the building.
And the main goal is to house government offices as originally intended. We did point out to the Infrastructure Minister that the current administration stopped works on the administrative building in VA4, the brainchild of the last Kenny Anthony government. And amid all this, government pays a whopping $58 million in rent annually. Our question to the former Prime Minister was, how do you propose that government reduces its annual rental fee?
Well, there are two ways. One is for clear determination to be made as to whether government will invest heavily in infrastructure, and that is office blocks. That we have to take into consideration as far as our past performances and our record on maintenance of buildings. We haven't got a good record on maintaining government buildings. The second thing is, if we do not do the heavy investment, we must be prepared to engage the private sector, either to rent property or to do partnerships with the private sector. And that is a decision that must be taken moving forward.
And the private sector has been engaged indeed. Numerous government offices within the city center are being rented out from the Syrian business community, including the Customs and Excise Department, the Treasury Office, and the Department of Youth and Sports. The Fire Service headquarters on Manuel Street as well, since its relocation from Bridge Street over a decade ago.
Wadawaj is now teeming with construction activity as the UWP administration focuses its attention on the redevelopment and reconstruction of the derelict building. However, the St. Lucia Labour Party has blasted the Alan Chasney-led administration, which in 2016 made known its intention for the property with an asking price of over $35 million. According to the SLP, such commitments should not be made on behalf of the people of St. Lucia in the waning days of the UWP government.
Parliament has 1 month left, and it is not a time for more borrowing or for more commitments to be made.
Deputy political leader of the SLP, Dr. Ernest Hilaire, during a press conference held on Wednesday, June 16th, alleged that despite the promises to renovate the building, the structure remains in a dilapidated state.
The building remained abandoned ever since 2001, ever since 2006, that is for 15 years, with government having to repay a loan on its purchase. It means that government would have paid over $45 million on this investment by 2020. Of course, you recall it was praised in 2006 by the then Minister of Tourism and now Prime Minister Alan Chasney as a wise investment. And of course, nothing happened to that building for 15 years.
The SLP claims in 2020 the land and building was sold by Amazon Properties, a government holding firm, to Orange Plaza Limited for $13.5 million.
We lost over $30 million on that sale alone.
But back in March 2021, Prime Minister Alan Chasney said that the government, after selling a portion of the land and building, was now looking to rent the second and third floor of the structure.
Many persons have done a structural assessment of the property. So structurally the property is fine. We have sold the ground floor, and we have maintained ownership of the upper 2 floors. And we've just signed a lease agreement where we've agreed to lease the property, and the person who's developing the ground floor will now reconstruct that entire building.
Okay.
And the goal is that we would either give it to Invest in Lucia for renting out to call centers, or possibly government offices, or a mixture of the two. We have a major call center company. It's one of the largest in the world, that have now agreed to come to St. Lucia, and that's one of the sites that we're going to be showing them. So construction on that property should be beginning within the next 2 weeks of development. And then right next to it, the unfinished piece on the right,
on the side,
there's been discussions with the developer to go and look at putting the regional court there.
However, despite the optimism of the ruling UWP, the SLP has cast doubt on what they claim is another ill-advised real estate property-driven commitment made by a government which has been dogmatic in its pro-growth agenda at the expense of St. Lucian taxpayers.
It means that our taxpayers will be paying $56.4 million in rent over the next 15 years of that agreement. $56.4 million in rent.
Lucia Labour Party is continuing its efforts to convince the government not to purchase the Hypermart complex, more commonly called the Darhe building. This latest protest comes one day after the Prime Minister's office revealed the building will be purchased by a private company owned by the government for $27 million, with an additional $48 million used to refurbish it. SLP Deputy Political Leader Philip J. Pierre is questioning the structural integrity of the building. He's also asking if the building, built for one purpose, can accommodate the function the government wants it to fulfill.
Its original design was for a mall, a shopping complex. Whether the government will have to spend much more money than originally anticipated to convert a mall into an office complex. We are speaking about structures, we are speaking about the original use of the building.
The media consultant in the Prime Minister's office says buying the complex is an investment in the country's future. Winston Springer outlined a number of reasons why the investment was sound. Among them, the company would pay $3 million of owed taxes to the NIC, and the deal would come with 10 acres of land in Union, valued at $4 million.
To facilitate the proposed redevelopment of Castries, which would require the demolition of certain government buildings and therefore necessitate the relocation of government offices housed in these buildings on a temporary and permanent basis. 3. To operationalize a property that has substantial potential for stimulating business and commercial activity, but has remained underutilized for many years.
Pierre says the investment would be better served elsewhere. He says with limited resources, especially in the current economic climate that has already sent the government to the IMF, the money used to purchase the borrower's property needs to be allocated elsewhere.
The contention is the use of money. Whether in these times that money will not be used better. Fact is, the money, even though it was raised by a private company or by a company that the government has the 100% shares, it is a contingent liability on the taxpayers of the country. So it will increase our national debt.
The former Commerce and Investment Minister wants to know if the government intends to follow through on its budget plan to build a more than $30 million office complex on the John Compton Highway. He says
rental payments per annum between 2008, 2009 and 2000 up until the last year gone, up until March 31st, 2021. And as you can see, over the past 5 years, we've seen an incredible rise in that figure. I mean, I've color-coded it just for the benefit of those out there. In yellow, that period within the Alan Chastney administration. And we're now looking at over $70 million on annual payments of government for rent at this point in time. That's a very, very concerning rate of increase. And even before that 2020, 2021, it was increasing. It was clearly way out of control.
70 million a year. And you're going to add another 4 million just from this. Another 4 million. And again, that's why it raises the question of why did the government believe this is prudent at this point. Why should we do this? Why do we have to do it? And I wanted to make a point to you that according to, look at clause 2.1, which you can bring up, they have agreed to offer moratorium on rent until the rental commencement date, which is the beginning of September, 1st of September, I think, next year. But the term of the agreement, which is the term of rental of the lease for 15 years, cannot expire until the landlords, the persons who we sold the building to, have paid off all the outstanding debts to financial institutions. So look at 2.1.
2.1, this is at the request of the tenant.
Yeah.
The landlord hereby leases and demises unto the tenant all the lease premises from the commencement date, with a moratorium on rent from the commencement date until the rent commencement date, for the term provided that the term shall not expire until all monies due and owing by the landlord to Republic Bank EC Limited or such other financier has been fully repaid. So basically, they don't release that until they've paid their loans.
Their loans. Now, I mean, somebody must tell us under what conditions can we continue to accept responsibility in case they are not servicing their loans? If for whatever reason they do not rent the rest of the building and there's a lot of empty space, because they have a business model.
Right.
They purchase it for X amount, refurbish for X amount, monthly expenditure of X amount, and monthly repayment to the bank based on revenue earned would be X amount.
Yeah. So in other words, government is giving them a sort of a bly, let's call it that, of about 25 to 30% of the floor space.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. But they still have to now go out, of course, and fill out the other 70% of the floor space.
Yes.
And if they're not very successful with doing that,
they cannot service their loan.
They may not be able to service their loan, or perhaps the cost of the improvements to the building may be more than what they originally expected, and the loan amount might go up, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So you might actually be in this arrangement for more than even the 15 years.
Precisely. It means we cannot end the lease and we cannot become the true owners of the floors that the Prime Minister spoke about until the company that bought the building and is refurbishing the building has paid off all their monies to financial institutions.
Say that that's categorically not true. The fact is the Durham Mall was in receivership with First Caribbean. First Caribbean had agreed to lend the money to purchase the building and also to lend the money to redevelop the building. So approximately $30 million EC for the building and another $60 or $70 million to rebuild the building. In total, about $100 million.
This is your season to smile with new.
Wash will soon be home to a few government offices as well as some other agencies, so says Labour Minister Dr. Virginia Albert Poyot. The information was disclosed ahead of Tuesday's parliamentary sitting. According to Poyot, discussions are ongoing as to which government offices will be relocated. The Diamond building was first discussed in the public domain when it was purchased by the UWP administration in 2006 under the stewardship of then Prime Minister Stephenson King. After 15 years and successive administrations, no work was done on the structure owing to a lack of funding. The Diamond again garnered public scrutiny when it was announced that the bottom floor of the edifice was sold to a private entity who would complete the entire project, then allow the government to repurchase the property via a rent-to-own agreement. The announcement, which was made in June 2021, just prior to the general elections, sparked heavy criticism from the then SLP opposition. At the time, Dr. Hilaire chastised Alan Chasney for miring the country in debt, alluding that the entire building was sold to the developer for a fraction of the true cost. Hilaire also claimed that the government would be paying $56.4 million in rent to the developer over the course of the lease. Chasney fired back, stating that not only was the claim that the entire building was sold false, but that the lease-to-own agreement would save the government of St. Lucia an estimated $275,000 a month or $50 million over the course of the agreement. To substantiate his claim, Chasney pointed out that the government was currently paying an average of $7.50 per square foot in rent, whereas the agreement was for $4 a square foot, a savings of $3.50 per square foot. The building has since been completed and rechristened the Orange Grove Plaza. On Tuesday, Poyot confirmed that the developer had in fact completed their obligations as per the lease agreement and that the government has retained the top 2 floors of the building.
The Orange Grove? Yeah. Well, they have completed the construction and government has to do the retrofitting for us to use the space. We are still in discussion as to which ministries are likely to occupy that space as well as some other agencies, because we have 2 floors, the first and second floor.
Poyot further confirms that the government will in fact own the space after they have completed payment as per the lease agreement.
This will be owned by government after we have paid it off for almost 16 and a half years. So right now we have completed the exercise. The contractor has finished the construction up to where they agreed to, and government now has to take it from there in terms of retrofitting the space and deciding which agencies will occupy the space.
Reporting for the Hot 7 TV News, I am Eldridge Charles.
I mean, a big story. A big story. I must apologize to elderly people.